have the civil rights movement as our topic, and this is a road to civil rights. And this is our bus, and it has a bunch of people involved in the civil rights movement. And we're going to take the bus, and it's going to travel down the road, and at each bus stop it'll drop an important figure off. And here are our figures.
Take the bus off.
Next we have these two. These are the people who kind of started the whole civil rights movement. We have on this side, pretty much we have a Venn diagram. You know what I mean by when I say Venn diagram. It's when you compare two things, and in the middle column you have what's both of them. First, we have this fine young gentleman who he pretty much demanded like a stronger tone for civil protest. He led the Niagara movement, and how I like to remember him is he believed work equaled baloney, because like he thought like you had to do, or he thought we needed stuff now, and his name is W.E.B. Du Bois, so work equals baloney is a good way to remember him. On the other hand, another pusher for this civil rights movement is another fine young gentleman who was a here he is, W.E.B. Du Bois. Here. The second one is a fine young gentleman who vocational schools, Tuskegee Institute, and he thought that, well, we can all reach equality if all African Americans did good works through, and then eventually achieve their status as whites. And that would be Booker T. Washington. Two things these guys had in common was they both worked in the NAACP. They pushed for civil rights, and they wanted to end segregation, the Jim Crow laws. Black nationalism. I mean, it started. One of the big promoters of black nationalism was Marcus Garvey. He was like, all right. His main focus was, let's move all the black people, or all the African Americans, ex-slaves, back to Africa to start their own home. So he goes to the next little spot. Black nationalism is actually been focused on self-determination. Martin Delany is considered the grandfather of black nationalism, and he just wanted to return the slaves back to Africa, more in the Liberia in Africa. Another thing, the Niagara movement. It was a black civil rights organization formed in 1905. W.E. Du Bois and William M. Trotter were like the leaders. And the first meetings were actually by the Niagara Falls on the Canadian side, so they could actually do stuff. The Niagara movement went against what Booker T. Washington was saying with we should do good works. They just wanted to get the laws so then they could be the same equal as rights.
Culture change. In the 1920s, it marked the foundation for really African Americans like becoming influential in music and literature and even in sports. So first we had the Harlem Renaissance, which originated in the 1920s. It was the first time that they really became real influential in music, and it was in New York, and it started when a bunch of people with the Great Migration. And then we have jazz poetry was also born under the Harlem Renaissance. And here's Langston Hughes. He was a big poet, and he wrote Misery, which is a famous poem. And then Jackie Robinson became the first African American to play baseball, and he wasn't just like an average player. He was one of the best of their time, and it really signified the end of segregation in sports, and he became like a baseball hero that was African American. So it really was a big step for African Americans. And then moving on, we have from segregation to integration, and de facto versus de jure segregation. De facto is when it's like in the community, it's something that they can't really choose. So it's like a bunch of African American people living in the same neighborhood or attending the same places. It just happens by accident or like by who you're friends with. Whereas de jure segregation is like mandatory segregation. It's enforced by the court, and they really don't have any other choice. In the Supreme Court case of Plessy versus Ferguson, it enforced segregation because Plessy was 1/8 African American, and he didn't want to move to the African American bus, and they forced him to move, and they said he's a minority, he should have it, be on a different bus. So he took it to court, and the Supreme Court ruled in favor of segregation. And then later on, Brown versus Board of Education, the African American man was not allowed to go to the white school, and they realized that actually the schools, it wasn't really separate but equal like they had said, and so they overturned Plessy versus Ferguson and forced integration into schools. And then desegregation of the federal government was this enforcement of the schools, and it was just like a chain of events, like he has said, and finally it ends over there with the Civil Rights Act. And then Central High School was a case where Ernest Green was one of the students, and there were 9 of them, and they went to Central High School, and they were like really discriminated upon. They had to call in like the National Army and stuff to protect the kids so that when they went to school they would be safe. And then the first African American Supreme Court justice was Thurgood Marshall, and this really marked a change in the United States. Like in the government, an African American was finally given the chance to have a bigger role by being a justice. Moving on.
Hey, I'm Sal Beecham, and this is the Extreme Activist section. We have a couple groups. The Black Panthers, they were known for their violent use of military policies and within their organization, and they wanted civil rights, and they wanted it now, and they thought any means was good enough. So they used violence, and they mainly were violent towards the police in California, and many of them got arrested. And it was kind of a setback for the civil rights movement because of their policy. Then we have Black Power, which is a political slogan used for racial pride, but it is also kind of associated with the violence of Black Panthers. And then we have someone who's less violent. I'd like to mention Malcolm X here. Barron's Cards 462 for you future AP students next year. He was a civil rights activist. He shared the same beliefs as Martin Luther King, but the only difference between him was he didn't disadvocate violence. He thought there was a certain point that you're allowed to use violence to get what you want, so people will listen. So that's why he's kind of in this extreme section. He would switch to a Muslim religion and became a very big leader in that, and then was later assassinated in New York giving a speech. Then we have Conall.
Alrighty, moving on to one of the last bus stops, guys. We have the heavy hitters during the civil rights era. We got Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King Jr. Some of the big acts that they participated in were the March on Washington, Birmingham Violence, Freedom Riders, and the Montgomery Bus Boycott. I'm going to start with Martin Luther King Jr. and civil disobedience. First of all, he was a little bit different from Malcolm X. Instead of allowing violence to be one of the things that they used to help fight off segregation, Martin Luther King really didn't want that because he believed that violence wasn't the way at all. He wanted to keep things peaceful and keep everything in order. This is shown in Birmingham violence. He marches in Birmingham, which is a very racist city, and he ended up getting arrested. Did not fight, didn't do anything wrong, he just got arrested and put in jail. This leads to this quote here along the bottom of our entire wall: "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." And that comes out of one of the letters he sent while he was in the Birmingham jail. Rosa Parks focuses in on the Montgomery bus boycott, which was when she was asked to move out of her seat after a hard day's work and refused. She was arrested and put in jail. Martin Luther King ended up getting the boycott put together, and there was a lot of violence against them. Whites and police officers attempted to stop them at every edge, and then they ended up actually failing. They boycotted the bus companies for over a year, and then they finally gave in and allowed everyone to sit wherever they wanted. Freedom riders were people that rode into segregated areas and did whatever they could to try and kind of force segregation. After the Montgomery bus boycott happened, they rode the buses into these towns, and it was really dangerous. A lot of them got hurt. Then there was the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which was formed by Martin Luther King. It was kind of just a civil rights group for African Americans, which clearly associated with its first president, who was Martin Luther King. Other than that, we'll go to the last bit of our wall, Civil Rights Acts.
Martin Luther King on this one.
Oh yeah.
Where'd he go? Oh, right there. Look.
Hey, this is Sal again, bringing the civil rights movement to an end. As you can see, we have reached our destination, the Civil Rights Acts, clearly passed in 1964 by Lyndon B. Johnson, that outlaws and bans discrimination in public places, restaurants, for instance, hotels, or in the workforce. And then we have the Voting Rights Act of 1965, clearly passed in 1965 also, passed by Lyndon B. Johnson himself. And this just outlaws discrimination practices in the voting polls and whatnot. And it all happened here in the Capitol, and this is where civil rights came, and laws are still going on today. And that is our topic, civil rights movement.